Brian Pahlowski, for those of you who don't know, and for those of you who do know, it's still Brian Thank you all for being here. We are here to celebrate and remember our very good friend, Frank Giordano. I want to say a few things before we start this off. We've got a lot of great people here who are going to perform and talk and sing, and it's going to be fabulous. It better be, or... First of all, I want to thank Aunt Beverly and Frank's whole family. You guys are amazing. Frank had said to me, you know, you do this and you do that and you do that, and that you have not only allowed me to do that, but have been so wonderfully supportive. I just can't thank you enough. I know he adored all of you, and you've got a new niece. I also want to say thanks to people who helped put this on. Erica Engelhardt, Laura Bocoletti, Peter O'Poming, Judy Brooke. Mr. Baldwin, thank you so much. You were just wonderful. Of course, we want to thank Karen Morrow, Mary Metzger, and Kelly Britt for their performances that we're going to enjoy. For agreeing to come up and speak. Thank you. And Tom Hanks. I also want to thank Rose Einstein and PJ Lutowski for all their help. I really appreciate it. I just can't do this without thanking Frank's angels. I've never seen anything like it. These two people were so wonderful, and Frank would call me up on the phone and say, you know, I just felt so awful today, and I couldn't get out of bed, and I didn't know what to do. And suddenly, one of them would appear at my half door, and they would come in with fruit, with water, with whatever it was that I needed before I even knew that I needed it. And that's Eric Anderson and Rosaline Brown.
You're stuck with us.
That's good. Okay, we're going to hear from people who've shared a lot of different parts of Frank's life, from New York, on and off Broadway, writing for the New York Times, to his appearances in clubs, traveling. We don't have anyone here from Northwestern who can discuss his football scholarship. I'm so sorry about that. Frank dealt with this illness, I think, just the way we all expected to deal with it, on his own terms. He said to me one day, "This is my death. I am starring in my death. I am not playing a supporting role. This is about me. If this isn't about me, then what the hell is?" He talked about going to see the oncologists at Kaiser and some of the doctors, and he'd go in and be in the waiting room for a while, and he said, you know, I look around that waiting room, and people are really sick. So he said, I just started doing my act. And he would have them laughing. Even people that didn't speak English were laughing. It was fun. But one day he called me and he said, you know, I really have to stop doing that. I need to focus on what's happening to me. And so that's what he did. I had never been in Frank's apartment before last summer. And I just have to say, Frank's home was Frank. It was just brimming with books and music and art and funny pigs. And that's right. He kept saying to me that he loved the saying that John Kennedy Jr. had when his mother died, that she had died in her own home among the things that she loved surrounded by people that she loved. And Frank said, that's what I want. That's how I want to die, in my own home, surrounded by the things I love. And he did. Of course he did.
Of course.
I did find, as I was going through his apartment, an essay. It's from 1953. It's entitled, My Autobiography.
Such a long life.
But I got to read you the first paragraph. Just picture yourself in 1927, the flaming 20s. This was the age of flappers, raccoon coats, and the Charleston. We've heard about these things, but not many people know that on a certain day in 1927, 2 people were married. These 2 average people were in 12 years to be my parents. On October 29, 1939, I was born at St. Joseph's Hospital in Chicago. I was named Frank for my father's father. I am of Italian descent. 14, he wrote that, at the age of 14. So we know he could write. Besides all of his talents, though, Frank had some character traits that I think we need to remember. He was such a man without pretense. He didn't brag, he just was frank. He didn't worry about how you really saw him. He was always himself. If you liked him, that was great. If you didn't, he did not make apologies for who and what he was. He was very comfortable in his own skin. And you either liked Frank or you didn't like him. But that was up to you. Frank was still the same no matter what. He was never shy about letting you know just how he felt and just what he thought about anything. With all of the intelligence and great verbal facility that Frank had, I never, ever heard or saw him pick on a lesser adversary. And that is so admirable. It would have been so easy for him to just slice and dice anytime. But he didn't. If Frank took a shot, he took a shot because he meant it. You had done or said something that he objected to, and he was going to let you know. On a rare occasion when he did say something that hurt someone, he was mortified and immediately apologetic. He also had this great sense of skepticism. I asked him one day why he was reading 4 newspapers a day. You know, nobody's reading newspapers at all anymore. Why are you reading 4? And he said it was because when he was young, he had been by a protest outside of a building, and he walked by and he said there were policemen on horses looking at it, and there were maybe 15 or 20 people, but they were very peaceful, carrying placards around saying that they were against whatever. And he said he got home and he turned on the news, and there was this big story about a riot with hundreds of people, and the police had been called in and they had to be on horses. So he said he realized that you could take any piece of information and by careful editing, remember I said that, PJ, careful editing. Careful editing and the way you slanted it, you could change a version of reality. So if you read 4 different newspapers, you had a shot at finding the kernel of truth about what was going on. Pretty amazing. Frank Giordano was colorblind. I think we all know this. When he met a person, he met the person. He didn't meet your sex, your race, your color, your religion, your ethnicity. He didn't care. He saw you. And if Frank didn't like you, he didn't like you. It was not business. It was not, you know, I don't like this or I don't like that. No, he didn't like you. You had done something to really piss him off. Sorry, Aunt Beverly, for using the word piss, but Frank told me once that his mother said that if he spent a half an hour with a group of nuns, they'd all be using the F word. That last day in Frank's apartment, was waiting for people to come and pick up the last of his things. And I was very sad because I knew it was the last time I was going to be in there. And it just was so much fun. I was feeling sorry for myself and looking around, and I noticed on the floor a toilet seat that had been hanging on the bathroom wall. It was in his sun, moon, and stars motif. He had several motifs throughout his apartment, sun, moon, and stars being one of them. And I looked at it and I realized that there was something on the back of it. And I never really paid any attention to this thing, but I went over and I lifted up the lid, and there was a mirror. And it said, "Are you feeling flushed yet?" Yes, I am. At the end of Frank's autobiography, he said he wanted to sing, he wanted to entertain people, he wanted to see his name in lights and on a marquee. He did all those things. He accomplished everything he wanted. He said, "Don't let other people influence you. Follow your own path." And he summed up his life in 6 words. "Followed my dreams. Most came true." There are a lot more things to hear about Frank. But one thing we know for sure, there's never going to be another Frank Giordano. He was one of a kind. He was a great friend and an absolute true force of nature. To Frank Giordano.
Frank, as a young man, growing up in my memories of Frank. My first thought when Leanne asked me to say something was that scene from Beyond the Sea with Kevin Spacey, when the young Bobby Darin, out on the street, out on the stoop, performing as a young Bobby Darin. And seeing the pictures now of Frank, you saw the similarity. The dark curly hair, beautiful brown eyes, and that beautiful, beautiful face. So that's how I remember Frank as a child. Every weekend, Frank, his sister Rosemary, who we loved dearly, his mom and dad, Pete and Mary, would come and spend weekends with the family, the big Italian family. And there would be many of us there, too many to count. But you could always depend on 2 things. Number 1, smelling grandma's pasta sauce. And number 2, Frank's going to entertain you. Frank would spend the day making tickets, not giving tickets, selling tickets. What would be his performance that evening? And everybody looked forward to it. And Frank would collect the tickets at the door. He was also the doorman. If you didn't buy a ticket, you had a chance to do so at that time. And then Frank would go on half hour, 45 minutes with this show that he had come up with during the day. As a teenager, things really didn't change too much. You could count on Frank coming every weekend. You could still count on grandma's pasta sauce, smelling that. But things changed a little bit. He did not perform just for the family, but he performed for the general public. There was a place that wasn't too far from our house called the House of David. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but it's some religious deal. But every summer they would have talent contests that began at the beginning of the summer and would end at the end. And you know, they would pick the top 2 talents for that night, and kind of like what we have currently on television. You know, they come back for the next week. Well, you can count on every year Frank coming back and Frank getting that nerd ball trophy. He would win every year. As Frank got older, the frequencies on the farm became less and less. But that didn't mean we didn't hear his entertainment. I can remember gathering around the radio. And listened to Frank's was when he competed in the Harvest Moon Festival, which there is a right up back there about that. You know how proud I was, my cousin Frank on the radio. Frank later went on, graduate from Northwestern and, do it at Broadway, Playbill magazine, New York Times, etc. So I really didn't get a chance to see Frank because we were living here on the West Coast. Frank was in either Chicago, New York, different countries performing. But then when he moved here, we looked so forward to the weekends and the holidays where, Frank would come and once again entertain us. He was trying out the new material every year, and we were always wondering, where's Frank coming from this year? But, had a million laughs, a million jokes, and Frank will certainly be in our minds forever. Now, there are a few stories which I'd like to tell you about Frank. And most of you probably recall when Frank was in the accident for both arms. My mother got a call on a Saturday morning from Frank, and it was kind of a muffled sound. And he said, "Aunt Bev," he said, "I was in an accident, and I'm hurting so bad." He said, "I had to dial the phone with a pencil in his mouth." So my brother Jack and I came from Orange County, and we go into Frank's apartment, and Frank's laying in the bed. Second coming of Christ. So we got Frank to the hospital, in which he had to have extensive surgery on his arms. However, with that surgery, Frank had to go into traction. Except Frank's traction was like this with bars underneath. And I remember Frank being there at this point, the senior side of the hospital, and telling the doctor, "How the hell am I going to eat?" The doctor said, "I'm sorry, that's the way they have to be set." So Frank came back to my mother Beverly's house, and the family was going to take care of it. And we'd have to feed Frank. And, there's also other things that need to be done, like bodily functions, baths, etc. We all got to know Frank real well. And of course, having Frank around for that 6 to 8 weeks was, once again, it was a show. He was coming up with something constantly, and we had a million laughs. Another story I want to tell you is, we had all gone back to Michigan for a family reunion. And Frank, my brother Jack, I think my cousin Douglas, we were all flying back from Chicago to Los Angeles. And the flight was delayed, so we decided, let's try every vodka in How we ever let us on the plane, but we made it on the plane. As we're on the plane, Frank gets out a pen and a barf bag. Frank draws on this barf bag. Behind us were a bunch of cheerleaders that were in some competition. So Frank crouches down in the seat and he says, "Hi, I'm Mr. Barfo." And goes on and on to do a puppet show on the airplane. By the end of the flight, all the girls had Barfo bags. And I'm sure that the stewardesses were very, very happy to see when we landed in Los Angeles. But those are some of the funny things that I remember. There's millions of them. I could be here forever, as well, probably all of you as well. I would really, really like to thank Ryan for all that you've done for our family. It would have been very difficult, given where we live and that, to take care of Frank's personal needs, not only after, but prior to Frank's death. And I just can't thank you enough. The family loves you to death, and yes, you are now a Pahlowski. I'm so sorry. Page 3 didn't come out of other people that I really needed to thank. But I think you mentioned them all. And from the bottom of our hearts, from the Pahlowski family, thank you so much.